Hey, welcome back to the Hemi-Sync podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Traci Stein. Traci has a PhD and a master's in public health. She's a Columbia University trained psychologist, certified clinical hypnotherapist, and award-winning author. She is also the creator of a series of popular guided imagery, self-hypnosis, and meditation audio programs on topics such as freedom from procrastination, achieving a healthy weight, self-compassion, mindfulness meditation, intuition development, manifesting a desired future, and enjoying deep restorative sleep. These audio meditations enlist the power of the mind to help listeners break free from unhealthy patterns and tap into their highest potential in body, mind, and spirit. Traci has formally trained in intuitive development for over 2 decades, and this thread of intuition has been woven throughout her work and life. As an educator, she integrates science and spirit in her work at the Spirituality Mind Body Institute at Teachers College, Columbia University. Traci has been featured or quoted in O, the Oprah magazine, Health, Shape.com, Women's Health, and other publications. And she has been interviewed on numerous radio programs and podcasts. Traci's own podcast, Unpacking Possibility with Dr. Traci Stein, highlights the journeys of people who have tapped into their intuition, overcome challenges, reached meaningful goals, and who share their strategies for profound personal transformation. In her new Hemi-Sync album entitled Cultivating Intuition, The Foundation, she guides you through some fundamental exercises to discern intuitive guidance and gain greater confidence in your innate abilities. Here's Traci Stein. So Traci, we're here to talk about intuition today, right? So for you personally, you're naturally intuitive. How did you find out you were intuitive?
Well, that's such a good question. I think everyone is naturally intuitive, but for me, I noticed from early on, I had experiences that were different from those of a lot of my friends and family members. So I absolutely saw spirits when I was younger, probably from the time I was 2 or 3. Not all the time. It actually scared me quite a bit. So I was glad when that lessened. But I would have precognitive dreams and see sparks of light around people sometimes when they were experiencing strong emotion. And over time, I studied energy work and trained in Reiki. And I noticed that when I had my hands in people's energy fields, or even if I was working on them at a distance, I would pick up information in a variety of ways. So, a whole range of experiences, but I eventually wound up seeking training to learn how to kind of have more control and both to kind of shut down, but also to tune in more specifically rather than waiting for things to just kind of happen.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So I actually had kind of a similar experience growing up, and I thought it was normal until I got to school and figured out that the other kids weren't having those experiences. How was that for you? Like, did you find that it kind of shut down a little bit when that happened, or how did you manage that?
So it's probably no wonder that I became a psychologist because I
Yeah,
definitely felt a little bit like the weird kid. I mean,
yeah.
I had friends, but my friends didn't experience these things. And, what was wonderful is as I got older, I did wind up meeting people who had had various intuitive experiences, and that really normalized them for me. And then I started reading work by a variety of people, both people who do research about intuitive phenomena, but also people who share their experiences. And I think one of the most wonderful things about that was realizing that the thing that I think most kids think about is, that magic and what if the world were magic, and we have all these fairy tales and movies that reinforce that. Over time, society kind of, takes that away from us or says, oh, that's not true. And as you start to develop your intuition, it really does feel like you are reacquainting yourself with that feeling that, oh, the world is kind of a magical and unlimited place.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So to kind of put a finer point on this, I mean, there are different types of intuitive faculties, let's say, from clairsentience to clairaudience to clairvoyance. I mean, how would you kind of describe yourself?
So at different points in my life, different senses were more prominent. I think I have all of the types of intuitive experiences. When I was very young, they were primarily clairvoyant. So I would see things that seem to be outside of me, but also the movie in your mind, and have very vivid and prophetic dreams.
Mm.
But also occasionally I would have clairaudient experiences and hear a song playing in my mind very loudly before I heard it on the radio or on TV, and so forth. Even if I hadn't heard it in a long time, I'm a naturally empathic person, and that makes for me being a better therapist, I think, because I'm attuned to what people are thinking and feeling. But I think most empathic people who are that way psychologically are also empathic psychically. And so the clairsentience is something definitely I notice. That might be one of the things I notice even most often these days.
Interesting. And so you've talked about already how most people are naturally intuitive. They might not know it. And so do you have any tips for folks that might want to kind of reawaken or expand on this capacity that they have and might not be fully cognizant of?
Yeah, there are so many things people can do. So what I learned actually through my study of remote viewing and some of the research is that practices like mindfulness meditation can really help us to focus, because intuitive guidance is often very quiet or subtle compared to the noise of everyday life. So being able to notice it requires kind of a more subtle, a more sensitive awareness to subtle phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
Practice is really important. If you wanted to get good at a sport, you would practice. You would get used to going through those motions, and you'd strengthen your muscles and become more flexible and more agile. And I think it works that way with psychic development as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So I think a lot of people expect, messages from non-ordinary sources to be spectacular or be unmistakable. And that's not really the case at all. A lot of it is just kind of learning how to turn down the noise in our conscious waking mind and really pay attention, really start listening and tuning in. Yeah.
What's interesting about what you just said is, I think for a lot of people who would consider themselves not to be very psychic, the impressions they notice are the really loud and dramatic ones. So before, say, a natural disaster or some sort of large event, more people do report having experiences of, a premonition or a premonition in a dream and so forth, or just a really strong feeling. Mm-hmm. But you're right, most stuff is not that loud, and it is less loud than normal daily stuff.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the stuff that gets written about or talked about is of the loud variety. But you talk a lot about kind of working with the mundane, with the everyday experience. And to me, that's really where the rubber meets the road. How do you kind of work with the mundane?
So to me, I think, some people who study psychic development will wind up becoming professional psychics. That's not most people.
Yeah.
For most people, it's learning when what you're picking up on is not just your own mental noise, but it is actually intuitive information that you should pay attention to. So that could be you meet somebody and you're considering dating them, or hiring a babysitter, or you're working on a project at work and you felt stuck, and your intuitive self has a much clearer understanding of what the answer might be. So being able to connect with that can help you in your relationships, in your work. There were a lot of times when I felt like the answers to an exam just seemed clearer, even if I didn't consciously know what the correct answer was. Not that people shouldn't study for their exams, but there's so many ways.
Yeah.
And with your own health as well.
Yeah. So you're really talking about tuning into gut feelings there.
Yeah. And again, for some people, it really is going to be a gut feeling. They're going to be more clairsentient and feel something in a part of their body that says something feels right, or it really feels wrong. Something is not right. Somebody's telling you something, but there's something that feels very off about it. And you should pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But, sometimes for other people, it's a clear cognizance. It's a clear, sudden knowing.
So let's talk a little bit more about using the body as an intuitive tool, because in this album that you've created with us, Cultivating Intuition, there are 4 exercises, and one of them is a chakra balancing exercise, or energy center balancing exercise, if you prefer. Why is that important?
So, your energy centers and your physical body are really your instruments for tuning in. And just like you would tune your guitar or your piano, or you'd make sure your radio is dialed to the right station, you want to be balanced and well tuned, for lack of a better word. But the other thing is that we are interacting with other people all the time, and we are taking in their stuff. And we don't even have to be physically with them, but their emotional stuff, their energetic stuff, their psychological stuff. And it's kind of like if you went outside and you went for a jog, and you were jogging past a high traffic area and you were sweating and there's a lot of pollen in the air, you'd want to come home and shower.
Yeah.
You'd want to take good care of you by rinsing off the stuff that isn't great for you. And when you're talking about intuitive development, also the stuff that doesn't belong to you. So I think it's especially important for people who either tend to pick up on people's stuff and may not know it, or people who are learning to deliberately do that. You don't want to hold on to anybody's stuff. It's not yours to hold on to. And it actually you can feel unwell when you do that.
That's a great way to put it, showering off. And so in terms of getting into the longer meditation that you've crafted with us, you're connecting with your higher self. And so now we're kind of moving beyond gut feelings, right? And how would you sort of describe this movement or this transition?
So the imagery utilizes a lot of things that work well, even when you're not working intuitively, but I think they work especially well when you are working intuitively. So mindfulness, helping you keep focused, hypnotic and imagery techniques to help people have a sense of positive expectancy, right? Expecting that they are intuitive. That helps kind of get the inner critic out of the way, because so often we endeavor to do something, we become really self-conscious or think about how hard it is. And that's just more mental noise that gets in the way. And the other thing is we want to acknowledge that we are timeless, and that the information that we are seeking when we're doing intuitive work could be in the past, it could be in the present, it can be in the possible future. It is just as easy to connect with something in the future as it is to connect with something in the present, for all intents and purposes. And using our minds and these various imagery techniques, I don't think it's just psychological that we're moving forward in time and connecting with this intuitive self. I think we actually are accessing this part of us that has already learned what we're seeking to learn, and can be helpful to us in the now.
Absolutely. And when, I think you can take people into these, quiet mind states, either using Hemi-Sync or using hypnosis or guided imagery, as you do in your clinical practice, we become a lot more receptive to this idea that time is not just linear. And that can be very powerful, both for personal development and for manifestation. Which I also wanted to get into that topic with you a little bit, because you also give a workshop in manifestation, correct?
Yeah, I do. And I use these tools in my own life. And, so often we are engaging in manifesting work without realizing that we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the time why our fears kind of attract to us a lot of the stuff we don't want, because we imbue these ideas of things with so much emotion that they become so real. We actually act in accordance with negative things sometimes before they're even here.
Right.
And we can be more thoughtful and have much more clear intention if we approach manifestation with awareness. But I also talk about manifesting as the mystical meeting the mundane. So being willing to also be aware and attentive and do the very mundane, sometimes unexciting work to try and bring these things into being as well.
I think one of the things that I find is that when you bring presence or mindfulness to mundane everyday tasks, they themselves have a way of transforming. You start to notice a certain magic to the mundane everyday tasks. And that is really where we spend most of our time, right? It's doing ordinary things. And so that's why I say that's where the rubber meets the road. But to your earlier point about manifesting or attracting things into our life that we really don't want, I think that's really common. In fact, I think people tend to do that more than the sort of general ideal of manifestation, which is obviously bringing things into your life that you do want. I sort of liken it to, driving a car or riding a bike. You tend to go where your eyes are. And so if you're focused on an object that you're trying to avoid, what often happens? You go right into it.
So true. It's so true.
I'm just curious because I don't think people like to hear that. And I'm wondering if in your clinical practice that you run into that issue a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Just again, in a very mundane way, the expectations that we bring into any interaction and so forth really shape it. So I'm just going to give you a common example. Somebody has been dating and not had a lot of luck, and they're fully expecting that every person that they might date will turn out to be, someone who doesn't get back to them or who isn't honest with them or can't commit and so forth. But I think what happens is they wind up having an uncanny ability to find those people because the movie that's playing in their minds all the time is one of constant disappointment. I as I mentioned, I've studied remote viewing, and a lot of physicists tend to be interested in and do remote viewing, and which is a very systematic type of psychic work, a military, created psychic procedure. But the reason I'm mentioning that is I remember Marty Rosenblatt, who is a physicist, talking about these possible futures. And in the way I have come to think about manifesting, both in my practice, I won't always talk about it in that way with people, but in a more energetic way, is that it's almost like you have a whole bunch of balloons attached to your hand by strings, and there are an infinite number of possibilities. The thing we focus our attention on and start moving toward, it's like pulling one of those balloons closer to us. So you make something that's maybe just possible into something that's more probable.
Yes.
And I think of manifesting kind of like that.
So I'm curious, you mentioned RB work. Did you start doing that type of work with Marty Rosenblatt, or was it a different school or lineage? That's fascinating stuff for me too.
So, I've been to the Applied Precognition conference, and that was a while ago, and I've done some of Marty's associative remote viewing things online, but I actually have studied more with Lori Williams and with Lynn Buchanan.
Sure.
Yeah, and they're both just amazing. They have very different ways of presenting and working with the material. Lynn is one of the original military remote viewers, and Lori was trained directly by him. But that's one of the things that Lynn will tell you, is that practice is everything. And that, your intention that you infuse your work with makes a difference. And one of the nice things about remote viewing is that, just like mindfulness, it trains you to observe and describe without attaching to or putting your own stuff onto what you notice.
Right. That's all really good. And so Joe McMoneagle also says the same thing about practice being first and foremost. But kind of going back to talking about, people having an expectation, let's say, for a bad relationship. And so they're basically programmed in that way. How do you kind of work with them to change that messaging or change that programming?
It really depends on the person and,
Mm-hmm.
somebody's degree of openness to the more esoteric or energetic will
Yeah.
determine whether that language comes in. But even if we're just working with the psychological, and there's a lot of overlap between them, right? But
Yeah.
um, what I love about hypnosis, even if it's not formal hypnosis, because all conversation has the potential to be hypnotic,
Yeah.
because conversation evokes images and symbols, and that's what our subconscious loves to use. And so, after identifying what they don't want, it's getting them in the practice of identifying not only what would they want, but how would it look, how would it feel to be in the body and in the emotions and the experience of having achieved something that is positive, and what does that feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they do that, the more vivid and real those images are, and it really does create a shift in terms of people's expectations and their emotional state, how they carry themselves, and
Yeah.
what they notice. Because, like you referred to before, you used the traffic analogy, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like, we have on a lens, like glasses that tend to make the world look a certain way or block out certain things, right? And if we take off those glasses, we might actually see some things more clearly, or other things that we didn't notice before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We shift our focus or our gaze to something that may have been there all along, but we were too focused on something else.
Right. So it sounds like you often take your clients through sort of a transpersonal portal or transpersonal work, which I don't think is how all therapy works. And that's very interesting because most therapists, I don't think, are as attuned to the esoteric or the numinous as someone like yourself is. And so for that reason, I think therapy can be a great gateway to kind of deeper inner work. And I also think that that a lot of folks, don't want to go to therapy, or they'll do anything they can to avoid going to therapy. Um, what what would you say to those people, or maybe to people that have someone like that in their lives that they think could benefit from going to therapy?
So it's a really tough thing to answer well, and I'll tell you why
Yeah.
I'm saying that. Look, some people will find other ways to heal and know themselves better and maximize their potential in one way or another. But some people really do need therapy. And
Mhm.
it's not the kind of thing that works particularly well when someone really doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because sometimes people feel like, well, it's very stigmatizing, or they feel like, they'd lose control, or they don't like the fact that there's a part of therapy that can feel really hard. It can be hard work, but at the end, you feel better and do better.
Yeah.
And I think if they have a sense of that, and if they're not shamed into going, I think they can get more out of it and be more likely to avail themselves of something that's important. Some people can manage blood sugar with diet alone, and diet and exercise, and that's great. Some people actually need medication as well. And
Hmm.
it's just getting them to that point. Sometimes people have to feel bad enough that they want to get away from that feeling more than they want to avoid whatever frightens them about therapy.
Hmm. And I've heard you speak on other shows about coming out, as you put it, relatively recently, in terms of sort of the more esoteric side of the practice and bringing that to the fore. Uh, I would love to hear more about that.
So I think it's one of those things, as you get older, you start to realize how much energy it takes to not share parts of yourself that feel fundamental with other people. And, it's not like I'll go to a cocktail party and bring it up with everybody, because not
Sure.
everybody, wants to hear it. But
Yeah.
um, I just feel like, the people who feel comfortable working with me, knowing that this is part of my truth,
Hmm.
will come, and the people who are looking for something else will do well to find that, and that's all completely good.
Yeah.
um but you know how it is when you are not fully exploring and expressing who you are, it can just feel so stifling and so draining.
Yeah.
It's very liberating to just kind of be, and how great to see so many people who are also interested in this work that happen to also be, have their feet on the ground, especially when they need to.
Very much so. Yeah. And I think that is more and more becoming the norm. People that can straddle both worlds. And so, I mean, just in your own case, so, I mean, you're a PhD from Columbia, you have a master's in public health from NYU, a very serious-minded person with a serious practice. But it's important, I think, to bring the esoteric more into the fore, to make it something that is normal, and that is accessible and approachable and also useful. It's something that can improve the lives of ordinary people. And transpersonal work, I think, is once again, a great way to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So I wanted to talk a bit about diet, because I know that's also an area of emphasis for you, and also goes back to kind of taking care of the body, which is this great intuitive instrument that we have. Are there any kind of keystones that you rely on in advising people about what constitutes a healthy diet?
Yeah, so of course it does vary person to person. There are a lot of diets that become trendy.
Yes.
What's nice about your body is it will tell you if something feels like it's working or not. Some people feel great on a higher fat diet and other people feel unwell. You should pay attention to that. I think generally foods that are less processed, that help you to feel grounded enough, because we have to live on planet Earth. We have to do the mundane things too, and we should. We're in a body, we need to take good care of it. But also just being aware that we don't want to be, if you're somebody who's eating a super meat heavy diet, you might feel too earthbound to be expansive. Your upper chakras are very expanded when you're tuning in. So paying attention to that. One of the things Lynn Buchanan talked about, and he said that they did research on this in the military, I don't believe they published this, was that people doing a lot of intuitive work use up a lot of B12. Now, B12, what's great about it is that you'll probably excrete what you don't need. I take more than the average person probably, and I find that I need it. I can tell when I'm starting to feel a little bit weak.
Yeah.
And but other people might not find that that's necessary. But just paying attention to your body, expending energy, grounding yourself. I've seen people who stay too heady after they do intuitive work because they're not in their bodies enough.
I think that's great advice. I mean, I know a lot of people that are really into keto for a while, or paleo or whatever, and that might work for some people, but it might not be right for you. And so you should listen again to your own intuitive sense. How about other supplements, like maybe galantamine or huperzine, which I've heard can help improve dream recall or things of that nature? Do you have any words of advice on those?
I am not familiar with them.
Okay.
And I do know a lot about a lot of supplements, but I have not used those. I think, I think the other practices that I'm familiar with, like keeping a dream journal, can be helpful. I think the Hemi-Sync technology is outstanding for meditation and for sleep. I've been interested in brainwave entrainment for a really long time. That can help. But I would say paying attention to, again, how your body feels. If you're low on something, it's worth consulting with a professional and making sure that you get what you need.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the dream journaling, because I know people have different approaches to that. Some folks get bogged down with trying to write down every single detail of the dream. And I'm just curious what your approach to it is.
So I think that if you wake up in the middle of the night and a dream feels very intense and it feels important, like there's something you want to make sure you remember. And I think most people, it's hard to describe, but most people know what I'm talking about. You've had that feeling like, I can't forget this. I need to remember this. I would write it down, and I would write down whatever detail seems relevant, and you might find yourself making notes at the end. As a psychologist, I would say sometimes the details that in the moment seem like, well, why is the fact that the feathers are white instead of gray important? But it might turn out that later on, something in that symbolism is important, especially if it's a very prophetic dream. But it was also just maybe in some symbolic way, describing the people in the dream. And if you notice how they felt, writing that down, if you're in a house, which usually represents you and your different levels of consciousness, I would write down whatever detail, even if it seems too, minimal to really consider. But that said, I don't think people should worry about getting it wrong. The more you do it, the more you'll notice the types of things you want to make sure you note.
Okay.
I'm very rarely somebody who's going to say there's one right way to do something. Kind of just don't buy into that. I feel like it can be stifling when we want to let people feel confident.
Yeah, very good. So again, kind of trusting your intuition as to what needs to be recorded. Cool. All right. Well, anything you want to say about this particular set of exercises that we've developed on the Cultivating Intuition album?
So it's Cultivating Intuition, and it's the foundation, because the exercises are really meant to be foundational. I think they're useful for people who've done some intuitive work or know they're intuitive and want to get back to it. But even for people who have never explored developing their intuition or aren't sure if they've had intuitive experiences yet, I think what it will do is prime people to expect success, be curious, be more present in the now, and learn how to tune their instrument. And what I think people will find is that even doing the chakra balancing exercise, it seems like, oh, it's really more hygiene. But I have to say, just doing the exercises, people may very well notice changes in their psychic perceptions just from doing that, both in the moment and generally.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about that. So what are some of the signs that things are shifting for you, that your perceptions are opening up, let's say?
So again, the physical body feeling more in balance. But, so say your throat chakra tends to be a little tight and you have trouble expressing your will in the world, or articulating things that are important to you, or you tend not to be a good listener. What you might find is as you balance that energy center, both the earthly functions tend to improve, but also that you pick up on more clairaudient information. So again, hearing a song or hearing your own voice saying something or a phrase, or hearing somebody knocking at the door 5 minutes before they actually do, things like that. A balanced root chakra is going to help you feel grounded in your body, but also more grounded after you do intuitive work. And that's really important. You'll notice that you're not feeling as spacey after you do intuitive work if your lower energy centers are balanced, and things like that. But again, more prophetic dreams, noticing more the very fleeting visual impressions you may get on the screen of your mind, noticing that you're with somebody and you feel a pang in your solar plexus, or that you feel all of a sudden very sad, and being aware that it isn't your sadness that you're noticing. So noticing the clairsentient and psychically empathic information for what it is.
Really good. So this sounds like an exciting journey that you'll be taking people on. Can't wait to see it come out, and I hope that you'll all check it out and enjoy it. Traci, do you want to tell people about your social media handles or any upcoming events before we say goodbye?
Thank you. Well, most exciting event definitely is this album coming out. Really excited and so grateful for this collaboration.
Likewise.
Again, big fan for a long time. And on Instagram and Facebook, on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Traci Stein. So just DrTraciStein, Dr. T Stein on Facebook. And my website is drtracistein.com. And so I'll always post updates there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Traci. And we'll see you all next time. Be sure to give us a like or share it up if this was useful to you. Leave a comment and we'll try to get back to you. See you all next time.
Thanks so much.